Welcome to the 14th video in the Secrets to Drawing video course brought to you by thevirtualinstructor.com. In this video, we're going to start looking at drawing mediums, and we're going to start with graphite. Graphite is a carbon material. It is sometimes mistakenly referred to as lead because when it was first discovered, it was thought to actually be lead. The material in graphite pencils that we're all familiar with is actually a mixture of pulverized graphite and clay. In this video, we'll discuss different grades of graphite and the different types of marks that they make. We'll also take a look at different forms of graphite. We'll also take a look at various ways graphite can be applied to a surface, and we'll finish up with a short graphite demonstration. First, let's explain the different types or grades of graphite. Most artist graphites are labeled according to the European model of labeling graphite. This is what we're going to discuss here, and we'll begin with HB, which is right in the middle. There's also a graphite grade called F, which is slightly between H and B, so we'll put it on top for now. HB is right in the middle of the graphite grade. There's also H pencils that go from H to 9H. These types of graphite progressively get harder, so a 9H graphite is harder than an H pencil and a 5H harder than an H. This means that when we put pressure on a pencil that has these grades of graphite in it, the mark that's going to be produced is lighter because less of the graphite leaves the pencil to go onto the surface of the paper. Here's a look at what H pencils look like, including F and HB. Notice that HB is relatively dark and it progressively gets lighter. Now there are also B grades of graphite, B through 9B. These pencils are actually softer, and because they are softer, they're going to make darker marks. So a B pencil is going to make a lighter mark than 9B, while an 8B pencil will make a darker mark than a 6B. Here's a look at what these grades of graphite would look like. Notice that the 9B is much darker than the other B pencils, while a B is very closely related to an HB. Now, we all know number 2 pencils. You might be wondering where they fit in. Well, the labeling system we've been discussing, 9B through 9H, is the European model. An American model uses numbers, which doesn't really apply to creating art. Here's a look at a standard number 2 pencil. We now know that a number 2 pencil is basically equivalent to an HB or an F pencil. It's a very typical ordinary pencil with a medium grade of graphite inside of it. If we were to take it and make a mark, it's familiar. But why limit yourself to making marks with one ordinary type of graphite, when graphite comes in so many different forms? Graphite can be spread over a surface using a pencil. It can be used in chunks. There's even liquid versions of it. In fact, there's a form of water-soluble graphite that when you add water to it, it acts like watercolor. Now let's go back to that number 2 pencil, or that HB pencil that we discussed earlier. You can see when I make marks on my paper, it's a medium grade gray. But here, let's take a look at a different pencil. You can see here that this is an H pencil, so when I make marks with it, it's noticeably lighter. There are 2 advantages to H pencils. One, because the graphite is harder, the tip will stay sharp for a longer period of time. Secondly, I can control my lighter values more specifically with an H pencil. Here's a 6B pencil. Notice how the 6B pencil makes a darker mark. The advantage to this pencil is I have a broader range of value to work with. One disadvantage, however, I must sharpen my pencil often because the graphite is softer. Graphite comes in all different types of forms other than traditional pencils. This is actually a pencil with a stick of graphite inside of it. The graphite inside is equivalent to about a 2B or 3B on the European scale. You might notice, however, that the texture that's produced by this pencil is different than the texture produced by the traditional pencils. This is important because if you're trying to create this texture, this is the type of way that you'd want to apply your graphite. Now, you might be wondering, how do you sharpen something like this? Well, pencils can be sharpened, graphite can be sharpened, by using sandpaper. In this case, the sandpaper is stapled to a plank, and I can rub my pencil over the surface or rub the graphite over the surface and produce a sharper point. You can do this with traditional pencils as well. Now here's another form of graphite. You can see that this isn't a pencil at all. Instead, it's just a stick of graphite that's sharpened to a point. Notice how the marks are different. Now, let's do a quick demonstration. In this demonstration, I'm going to do a quick drawing of a pear. I'm going to start with the HB pencil, but if you're doing a drawing, you may want to start with an H pencil if you're afraid that your marks are going to be too dark. Then I'm going to go to the graphite holder that I showed earlier. Remember the textural marks that this type of graphite produces. I'm using this pencil because it is a softer graphite and I can define some of the darker values at the beginning of the drawing. Once I have some of the darker values defined and I've got my light source established, I can then take either a blending stump, as seen here, or a blending tortillon, or you can just roll up a piece of paper. Whatever you do, don't use your finger for blending. This is because your finger produces oils, and when mixed with the graphite, it will become messy and hard to erase. It's always better to use tissue paper or one of the blending devices I've shown you here. Remember also, it's not always necessary to smear or blend areas. I'm doing this because the texture of the pear demands it. I'm going to go back with different layers of different types of graphite. For example, now I'm adding a softer graphite in pencil form. The pencil I'm using is equivalent to about a 4B on the graphite scale. With this sharpened pencil, I can begin to add many of the details that exist in my drawing. I've also placed a paper towel between my hand and the surface of the paper. This is because I want to prevent the palm of my hand from interacting with the graphite and smearing it on the paper. When you're working with graphite, always remember that it's going to be easier to make areas darker. It is very hard to make areas lighter, however, so keep that in mind as you work. Now I can go back with a vinyl eraser and touch up some of the areas that I want to be a little bit lighter. I can also make areas a bit darker. Once the finished details are put on, my graphite drawing is complete. So what did we learn in this video? Well, first we learned that graphite is actually non-toxic. It's a carbon material that when in pencil form is mixed with clay. It really isn't lead at all. Grades of graphite can vary greatly, with harder varieties producing lighter marks and softer varieties producing darker marks. Each has its benefits and advantages. We also learned that graphite can be applied to a surface using a variety of different methodologies and produce a variety of different results. In the next video in this video series, we're going to take a look at another drawing medium, charcoal.